Hey everybody, Justin Howe here, and on today's episode of Home Buying Hacks, we are going to be taking a look at something that is very important to both the buyer and the seller when a home transaction is taking place, and that is a home inspection report. So please join me. We're going to jump right in, go through the report itself, and kind of discuss some of the details about what to expect in a report and how it can be valuable for both the buyer and the seller in the transaction. So let's take a look. As you can see here, we've got just a generic inspection report. Doesn't have any exact name or address, but we do have a house that we can look at. So with these inspection reports, there is no standard format required. They do have to follow some guidelines as to what's going to be covered in the home inspection, but how they go about doing that varies by home inspector. So as you can see here, the table of contents on the inspection report kind of breaks down everything that you would see on the house: roof, the exterior, heating and cooling. We're here in South Texas, so I'm not going to focus too much on the basement, but if you did have a basement, there would be quite a few details that get covered in an inspection report. And again, doors, windows, interior, the foundation, things of that nature will be included in there. Now, one thing to keep in mind with inspectors is each one varies, like I said, since there's no standard format, and some of them will put together an extremely detailed report. Some of them will just cover the bases and document things. So if you are thinking about hiring a home inspector, one good idea is to ask to see some of their previous reports, get a feel for what they detail, how they detail it, and that will allow you to get a good idea of the feedback that you're going to be getting for the inspection that you're going to be paying for. So always take a look at one of their previous reports to get a better idea of what you might be getting in the report that you take a look at. So going back to the report itself, a lot of the front end is going to have disclosures and disclaimers that are required by the home inspector to put out there, because again, keep in mind, these guys are just inspectors. They're not professionals on everything. Their job is to document things that may be a concern, but they're also going to have a lot of recommendations for you to get that backed up by professionals for that specific area, like roofing or the HVAC or electrical guys. There are guys out there that if there is a concern that the home inspector feels might be significant, it may be worth your time and money to have a professional come out and look at it specifically to give you the feedback on it. So I like this report because he does create a very detailed report, does a good job of laying out symbols to kind of make it easy to read so that the user understands what they're looking at as they're going through it, what might be important, what needs to be addressed. So you'll have your general property information in there, and again, a lot of the stuff in the front end of these things is disclosures and information about what they're using to inspect, how they're measuring, and things of that nature. So you can kind of understand that the front end is going to be most of their disclaimers and things like that to give buyers and sellers information on that. So again, I know I'm scrolling through this kind of quickly, but if you wanted to look it up, I will include a link in the description so you can actually go look up a copy of this if you want to run through it yourself. But again, just kind of looking at all of the stuff that they're putting in on the front end, it's easily seen for basically a lot of CYA, in my opinion, but that's what they've got to do because a lot of people pin a lot on these home inspections. And again, everybody needs to understand, both buyer and seller, that home inspectors are not the be all end all for it, but they are a good resource to provide feedback on the home itself. So if we take a look at a lot of this, and you can see this guy does a very good job of putting the information, the details and stuff in there. So then we actually get into the meat and potatoes of the actual inspection, looking at the roof, and you can see they're going to have general comments on it and everything, but then most inspectors will provide photos of what they see and details about each one. So in this particular example, you can see he's got the roof, and there's some buildup of some moss on the roof itself. And by his little disclaimer here, he's saying this is a maintenance thing, or something to keep up with to make sure that the moss itself doesn't prevent further damage to the roof. And again, there just stuff in here about maintenance and getting the buildup off of the roof, and then discussing flashings. He's going to point out in an inspection areas of concern where you can have potential water issues with it. And so again, a good inspector will just kind of point these things out. Now keep in mind, in an inspection report, just because something's pointed out, it isn't a critical problem or things like that. Now, there may be some critical problems in the inspection report, but not everything is the end of the world. They're just things to point out that are a part of the house and to be aware of, both for the seller and the buyer. Now he gets into some interior photos here, and he's documenting some potential water leaks, which again, that may be an important thing to address both on the seller side and the buyer side. Is it a repair? Had it been fixed? Is it an unknown issue that could be something wrong down the line with it? And again, seeing some of these detailed pictures and pardon me, knowing what I know about roofs, this particular one right here, the darker spots definitely might be something that wants to be addressed either by the seller or by the buyer. So again, positive outcome from things like this will give you feedback on that, because how many times do we go into our attics to take a look at things? It could be happening and we don't know it, just because that's not something we do every day. So again, going through exterior stuff, pointing out little things, gaps in the siding, things not being attached, we can see in the pictures here, and give some positive feedbacks on how to clean things and maintain them. So again, if you were the seller, this kind of information would be good to know so that you could get your siding cleaned up before you put the house up for sale. If you're the buyer, good feedback as always to know what you might need to do if you want to spruce it up once you purchase the house. So then we get into other stuff, doors and windows. They're going to open and close most doors and windows, check them out, see if they're functioning properly, and then looking around at different elements of the house, including the decking. And we see, again, details like in this picture, this deck could use an extra step coming off of it. Now, is it the end of the world if it doesn't? Not really, but things to be aware of that may not be either up to code, or it might be safer if a step is put in there versus not. And again, they're going to get in and look at the nitty gritty, the underside of things, to really inspect it and make sure there's not a whole lot of problems. So again, right here we got the basement foundation. I'm going to just kind of scroll through that quickly because South Texas, we're not necessarily concerned about that. They will get into the heating and cooling units as far as how they function. Now again, home inspectors are not HVAC professionals, so most of them, if you read disclaimers, they're going to tell you to get an HVAC inspector out there. Their report will say something to the effect of, it appeared to be working when I turned it on. So don't know how helpful that is, but again, it's not their purview to get into the nitty gritty as to the complete and total performance of HVAC, AC, heater units. It's just theirs to note, are they functioning? Are they not? Do they appear to be in good shape? Are there any obvious problems that a non-HVAC person might be able to identify? So be looking for that. Again, this particular one, I know it's hard to read as I'm scrolling through, but he was making an obvious note here that there's an HVAC unit right next to the driveway, and it could potentially be a hazard if a car could run right up on there. If one of the teenage kids wasn't paying attention, hit the gas instead of the brake, you could take out your HVAC unit and cause not only damage to the car but the HVAC. And if you've ever been in South Texas in the summertime, the one thing you do not want is your air conditioning to break. So again, pointing out these little things, going through it, they're going to cover the plumbing and how things are, the proper way to do things. He does a good job here of kind of documenting what is required and what is illegal, so that if he sees it in the house that he's looking at, it's not really hey, that's not fair. It's just, hey, by code, this is what is legal and this is what is not legal. So he's documented all that in there, noting little things in here, stuff not getting terminated properly in the plumbing, and making sure the backflow is correct. So again, a lot of this stuff may not be familiar to you on a day-to-day basis, but the home inspector's noting these things. And I always want people to keep in mind that not every one of these things, again, is the end of the world. It's something that gets pointed out, and every house is going to have little things here and there. And if you've lived in the house for a long time, you may be very familiar with them, very aware of them. But to a buyer coming in, taking a look at it, it can be something they're not used to, and they don't realize that, hey, it's been that way for a long time and everything works fine, so not really that big of a deal. But again, as a home inspector, it's their job to kind of point those things out, because it needs to be obvious not only to the person who's lived there for 20 years, but the person that's deciding to buy the house as well. I mean, it's only fair. So going through and looking at it, we've got, looking at the toilets, checking everything out as far as how they function. Some home inspectors will note that, the lid to the toilet is loose, or the top of the toilet lid is a little bit shaky. Again, things that can be easily fixed, but needs to be addressed so that everyone's aware of it. Going into sump pumps, again, we're not necessarily concerned with those. Now, electrical stuff can be something that gets a little more into the nitty gritty, because there are code requirements with electrical, and along with the code requirements comes safety issues, because if the house isn't wired correctly, or if there are some electrical issues, that can be a long-term hazard for the buyer. So as a seller, it's a good idea to pay attention to this aspect of it, because you don't want to be presenting a house that may be an issue and you're not disclosing that to the buyer. That can be a big no-no and create some big problems in the sale of the home. So be aware of that. Now, this particular junction box, there's a lot going on here, I can tell you. Wires coming in, things getting fed in there that might be an issue, might need to be looked at. Some stuff with the wiring, what's up to code and what isn't. Again, I would tell you, just looking through this inspection report and knowing what I know, this is one where you'd want to hire an electrician to come out, take a look, and give an assessment. And that may cost you $100, $120 for a visit like that, but it's going to give you the knowledge and somebody who knows that, hey, because the house was built in a certain time frame, that code, what's done to it may not look right to the inspector, but it may still comply with the building codes at the time the house was built. So again, a little extra attention on the front end with a professional, an electrician, might be able to answer some questions and assuage some fears with the inspection report itself. So again, they're going to go through and they're going to test outlets for positive grounds, negative grounds, GFCI, electrical compliance. Like this particular one right here, I suspect it's out in the garage, just looking at it, but you've got a plug on a wall without a cover on it. Now that's going to be kind of a no-no in the electrical world. Is it the end of the world for the house itself? Probably not, but again, having the cover on there is going to be safer than not having the cover on there. So easy fix to be done, but needs to be paid attention to. So kind of scrolling through the rest of it, covering the electrical, covering the lighting, safety issues they might be noting on there. Here you got wiring running through a cabinet. I'm sure that's for under cabinet lighting. That's kind of the DIY way to do it. Wouldn't necessarily comply with electrical, electricians getting things done because of the way they've got to do it to the code. So you can see again, we're scrolling through this kind of quickly, but testing GFI outlets, and that's important for grounding because there's certain locations, bathrooms, kitchens, things like that you need to have a GFI outlet. Then we get into smoke detectors and smoke alarms and CO2 or carbon monoxide detectors, and they've got some stuff written in here for code as to how many are required. So if you are selling a house, this may be a good area to review to make sure that you've got the proper amount of smoke detectors and they're in the proper place. And because again, it's a safety thing that, is it necessarily your responsibility? Can the buyer put them in after you move in? Sure, they can. But again, that's one more little selling feature that, hey, all the smoke alarms are there. It's what it's supposed to be. That's one less thing that the buyer has to worry about. And you're kind of doing a good deed by presenting a house that's got all the proper safety measures in it. And again, you can buy a decent smoke alarm for $30-$40. So 3 or 4 of those, you can get your house outfitted for less than $100, and that's one less thing that you have to worry about. So kind of jumping back into it, again, they discuss the carbon monoxide and things of that nature. So they jump back a little bit into the floors. He's checking for level here in this photograph. You can see he's got a rather small level, which is kind of hard to tell how level the floor really is on a level that small. But again, noting that there may be some settling in the house over the years. And while it's not necessarily a bad thing, it is evident in the inspection report that he made here. So you've got all of those things, chimneys and the flues. Again, an important thing. If you got a chimney, you want to make sure that it's clean and clear and there aren't any issues. This picture points out a nice little hole in the seam here that may be allowing some smoke and some contaminants out through that chimney flue. So that may be something that needs to be addressed before putting that house up for sale. And then running into insulation in the attic, they're just doing a general overview of what's required and what they found. So again, the idea being that we have a clear understanding of what is present in the house, what's recommended, and you can kind of determine from there if that's something that, as a seller, do you need to go in and put the time and effort, or is it an acceptable thing, something that the buyer may or may not buy into on the house. And so again, we're just kind of scrolling through, looking at all the different stuff, the ventilation systems, making sure they're all present and they're working. So he's got on here, there's kind of a little no sign. Like I said, he didn't operate the system at the time of the inspection. It's on a timer switch. The system appears to have been recently serviced and looks in good condition. It's recommended that this system be thoroughly tested before the close of escrow in order to ensure proper installation. So he's kind of letting you know, hey, this was here, but I didn't take a look at it. So you've got to make sure that you get that taken care of. I'm going to run through appliances and basically stoves, everything working. Dishwasher, is it working? Microwave, if that's staying with the house. They've got refrigerators in here. Now, a refrigerator may not necessarily stay with the house, but it's included in the inspection report. So again, all the little details as far as where he's seeing things, steps, are they proper width to code? Again, maybe not, but he's pointing it out. And again, it's probably been like that since the house was built. And if you've lived in the house for a long time, hey, a 9-inch step is a perfectly good step for you, but code may require that it be 10 inches or 12 inches, whatever it may be. So just be aware of that when you're looking through the report. Not every X on here is a complete and absolute boo-boo, but it needs to be included in the report so that everyone's aware of it. Now you see, we kind of finished the main report, and he kind of goes through and does a few more detailing on things as far as major issues or maintenance issues, things that weren't acceptable, points out safety issues. So he kind of gives a quick overview on the things that really may need to be addressed in, either prior to closing or be addressed as a part of the closing if there's going to be a price adjustment or something like that. He's got repair and replace, siding, flashing, and trim, all of those details, running through the basically the different sections and kind of summarizing the things that the home inspector feels may be important to the buyer or to the seller on the house. So this is nice in this report because you can kind of skip to the end and hit all the things that are really may be important to be addressed as the seller getting it ready to fix it up, or as the buyer, something to take a look at that can be a long-term issue with the house itself. So kind of scroll through all that, and then you get your bill at the end. And this particular report, you can see was $575. So again, that can vary from inspector to inspector, and again, that can vary by how thorough an inspection that you want to get. But expect anywhere between $350 to $700 for a good inspection report like this. But having the inspection report in your hands can be a super valuable tool. And again, if you're the seller, that $575 spent on the front end allows you to identify things that can save you thousands of dollars in the sale of the home on the back end. Because on the buyer side of things, when they get an inspection report, the buyer's mentality is they're looking for everything that could possibly be wrong with the house because they're making a big purchase and they don't want to put a bunch of money into it and find some problems. So a lot of the stuff in the inspection report on the buyer side can get magnified a whole lot bigger than what it may actually be to the buyer. And so as a seller, if you can kind of nip that in the bud, take care of a few of these things that may be major issues coming up on the inspection report, that allows all of the minor things to not be as big of a deal to the buyer when they get their inspection report back and they start looking through it and finding things that need to be addressed. So again, it is a report that's typically done, the home inspection is typically done by the buyer after they've made the offer on the house. But again, I'm a strong proponent of spending the money as a seller on the front end to get your own inspection report so that you get a good idea of what may be coming up, and it allows you to tackle some of those things so there's less surprises at the tail end of the thing. So again, keep in mind on both sides that things that show up in the report are not the end of the world. A lot of it is just things that are part of the house, but there are definitely some things that need to be addressed: functioning windows, electrical issues, plumbing problems, potential roof leaks, stuff like that. Obviously, can be a red flag and have an impact on the sale of the house. But if both buyer and seller are aware of them and they're willing to work together to resolve the ones that may be issues on both sides, the end result is going to be a good transaction. The buyer's going to get the house they want, the seller's going to get the price that they want for it, and everybody's going to be happy. So I hope this information was helpful to you. I appreciate you taking the time. I know it was a long video, but obviously with an inspection report, there is a lot to cover. And if you ever have any questions on anything, feel free to reach out to me. I'll be happy to help you out with that. And with that, I will see everybody next time. Thank you.